And you have guys like Kurt Russell and Bill Paxton and Val Kilmer. The cast in that film alone, all of them, and a lot of them are gone today.
For more than 30 years, Tombstone has been called one of the greatest westerns ever made, but according to one of its own stars, the movie audiences loved wasn't the movie they originally set out to make. For more than 30 years, Tombstone has been called one of the greatest westerns ever made. It gave us unforgettable performances, iconic one-liners, and a version of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday that many fans consider untouchable. But according to one of the film's own stars, the movie audiences fell in love with wasn't the movie they originally set out to make. That star was Sam Elliott. To millions of fans, he was simply Virgil Earp, the steady, respected older brother who held the family together. Behind the scenes, he was witnessing a production that was slowly coming apart. A director was fired, entire sections of the screenplay disappeared, characters were rewritten, and decisions were being made that would permanently change the film. Years later, Sam Elliott revealed something remarkable. He believed the original version of Tombstone was one of the greatest screenplays he had ever read, and that the finished movie, successful as it became, had lost part of its soul along the way. So how did a film surrounded by chaos become a Hollywood classic? And why do the people who made it still believe there was an even greater movie hidden inside it? This is the untold story behind Tombstone, and the secret that changes the way you'll see it forever. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine Tombstone as anything other than a classic. Its dialogue is endlessly quoted. Its characters have become legendary. And for many fans, it's the film that brought the American Western back to life. But before a single scene was filmed, there was a very real chance Tombstone would never make it to theaters. In the early 1990s, Westerns were considered one of Hollywood's riskiest genres. The era of John Wayne and Clint Eastwood had faded, and studios believed audiences had moved on. Investing millions of dollars in another Western looked more like a gamble than a smart business decision. Then came a screenplay that changed everything. It was written by Kevin Jarre, the screenwriter behind the Academy Award-winning film Glory. But this wasn't another simple cowboy movie. Jarre had spent years researching the real events surrounding Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral. His script was ambitious, detailed, and deeply committed to historical authenticity. It wasn't just about gunfights. It was about loyalty, family, politics, and the slow collapse of law in the American West. The screenplay attracted an extraordinary cast. Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, Powers Booth, Michael Biehn, Stephen Lang. Even legendary actor Robert Mitchum agreed to narrate the film. The actors weren't signing up for what they believed would be another Hollywood Western. They believed they were about to make the definitive Western of their generation. There was another reason for that confidence. Kevin Jarre wasn't just the writer, he was also directing the film himself. Everything seemed to be falling into place until production actually began, because once the cameras started rolling, the man who had imagined Tombstone struggled to bring it to life. Kevin Jarre knew the story of Tombstone better than anyone. He had written every scene, researched every historical detail, and convinced some of Hollywood's biggest actors to believe in his vision. But writing a great screenplay and directing a major Hollywood production are two very different challenges. Tombstone wasn't a small character drama. It was a massive period production filled with horseback chases, gunfights, explosions, hundreds of extras, and one of the largest ensemble casts of the decade. Every day on set meant coordinating dozens of moving parts while racing against a tight production schedule. Almost immediately, problems began to appear. According to the source transcript, Jarre struggled to keep the production on schedule. He reportedly wanted to shoot the film with the visual style of classic Western directors, carefully crafting large cinematic compositions. But those ambitions came at a cost. Filming slowed, schedules slipped, and the budget came under increasing pressure. For the studio, it became a simple calculation. A delayed production meant rising costs. And with the Western genre already considered a financial risk, there was little patience for setbacks. Only about a month into filming, the decision was made. Kevin Jarre was removed as director. For most films, losing a director in the middle of production is a disaster. Scenes have already been filmed. Actors are committed to one creative vision, and replacing the person leading the project often creates confusion, uncertainty, and conflict. That was exactly the situation facing Tombstone. The production suddenly found itself with an unfinished movie, a cast that had signed on because they believed in Jarre's script, and no clear path forward. The studio quickly brought in veteran director George P. Cosmatos to finish the film. Officially, the crisis had been solved, but according to later accounts discussed in the source material, the biggest changes to Tombstone were only just beginning. Because while George Cosmatos would receive the directing credit, some members of the cast believed someone else was quietly shaping the movie behind the scenes, and that secret would remain hidden for years. When George P. Cosmatos officially replaced Kevin Jarre as director, the production finally had someone back in charge. At least, that's what everyone believed. For years, the public story was simple. Kevin Jarre had been fired. George Cosmatos stepped in. Tombstone was saved. But more than a decade later, that version of events was challenged by the film's biggest star. According to Kurt Russell, what happened behind the scenes was far more complicated. In an interview with True West magazine, Russell claimed that after Jarre was dismissed, the producers wanted him to take creative control of the production. Russell said he declined the official directing credit, but agreed to oversee the film in another way. His solution was unusual. Rather than replacing the director publicly, Russell said the studio brought in George Cosmatos to run the set, while Russell privately planned much of the following day's work. According to Russell's account, every evening he would prepare detailed shot lists and discuss the next day's filming with Cosmatos. The next morning, Cosmatos would execute that plan on set. Russell also claimed he promised never to speak publicly about the arrangement while Cosmatos was alive, revealing the story only after the director's death in 2005. If Russell's recollection is accurate, it means one of Hollywood's most celebrated westerns was shaped by an arrangement almost no one knew existed. It's important to note, however, that this account comes primarily from Kurt Russell's own interview. The source transcript does not present independent confirmation from George Cosmatos himself, and interpretations of who creatively guided Tombstone have remained the subject of discussion among film historians. Whether Russell was effectively directing the film or simply playing a major creative role, one thing is clear: the production had entered survival mode. Every decision now centered on one goal: finish the movie. That urgency led to the most controversial choice of the entire production. Pages of Kevin Jarre's screenplay began disappearing. Entire character arcs were shortened, scenes were removed, and one member of the cast believed the film was losing the very thing that had made the script extraordinary. That actor was Sam Elliott. By the time production was back on track, Tombstone was no longer the same movie Kevin Jarre had written. The priority had shifted. The production wasn't trying to make the biggest Western ever filmed anymore. It was trying to finish one. To stay on schedule, large sections of Jarre's screenplay were removed, supporting storylines were shortened, quieter character moments disappeared, and several scenes that expanded the world of the Earp family were either reduced or cut altogether. According to the source transcript, the goal was to create a tighter, faster-moving film that could realistically be completed within the remaining time and budget. Most of the cast accepted the changes. Some even volunteered to give up dialogue if it helped keep the production moving. But one actor reacted differently: Sam Elliott. Years later, accounts from the production recalled Elliott joking that if anyone cut a single word of his dialogue, he'd kill them. Whether delivered with humor or frustration, the remark reflected something much deeper than concern over screen time. According to the transcript, Elliott wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for the screenplay. In a 1993 Entertainment Weekly interview, Sam Elliott described Kevin Jarre's original script as one of the best screenplays he had ever read. Then he made an even more surprising admission. He said that if the shortened version, the one that ultimately became the finished film, had been the script he was originally offered, he likely would have turned the role down. Why? Because, in Elliott's view, the cuts removed what he called the story's connective tissue. Those weren't the explosive shootouts or memorable one-liners. They were the quieter scenes, the conversations, the moments that explained why these characters made the choices they did. For Elliott, those scenes gave the film its emotional weight. His own character, Virgil Earp, was one of those most affected by the edits. Much of Virgil's development as the moral center of the Earp family was reportedly reduced as the screenplay became leaner. Yet, here's the irony. The very changes Sam Elliott believed weakened the film may have been the reason audiences embraced it. By stripping away much of the broader historical drama, Tombstone became faster, sharper, and more focused on the unforgettable relationship between Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. And that leaves one fascinating question. Did Hollywood accidentally create a classic, or did it lose an even greater film in the process? More than 30 years after its release, Tombstone is still quoted, still celebrated, still considered one of the greatest westerns ever made. But the people who created it often remember something different. Not just the movie audiences saw, but the movie they almost made. Sam Elliott believed Kevin Jarre's original screenplay contained a richer, more complete story. He argued that many of the quieter moments, the scenes that gave the characters greater depth, were lost as production fought against time and budget. To him, the finished film was only part of what had once existed. Kurt Russell, on the other hand, later suggested that those difficult decisions were necessary to save the production. The tighter focus, the faster pace, and the emphasis on the relationship between Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday helped transform a troubled film into one audiences couldn't forget. And perhaps that's the real story behind Tombstone. It isn't about proving one man was right and the other was wrong. It's about understanding that two completely different visions may have been true at the same time. One vision fought to preserve every layer of an epic historical drama. The other fought to make sure the movie survived at all. We'll never know what Kevin Jarre's full version would have looked like. We'll never know if it truly could have become the Western equivalent of The Godfather, as some people involved with the production later suggested. What we do know is that the version audiences received became a classic, despite the chaos that surrounded it. Maybe that's why Tombstone continues to fascinate people decades later, not because it's a perfect film, but because it's a reminder that some of Hollywood's greatest classics are born from compromise. Behind every unforgettable line, every legendary performance, and every iconic gunfight, there may be another movie, one the audience never got to see. And perhaps that's the biggest secret Sam Elliott wanted fans to understand. Not that Tombstone failed, but that its greatest mystery isn't on the screen. It's everything that was left behind.